I'm trying to look down the road. Am I trying to create people who are focused on I'm better than you, my band is better than you, or whatever? Or am I trying to create people who consume music, who once they get out of school, they may never play that trumpet again, but they might have 10 kids and say, well, because I enjoyed choir or band or orchestra, I want all 10 of my kids to have exposure to that same thing. That's more important to me than this other thing. And, and I'm proud to say that I understood that fairly early. And it's because of the people who mentored me, and they kind of helped me, and I think figure out what's important and what's less important. And competition ratings, or they have their place, but you got to be careful how you use them.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Everything Band, a podcast that features conversations with composers, conductors, and performers of music for winds and percussion. My name is Mark Connor. I'm a composer and educator, and each week I have the good fortune to speak with and share the stories and wisdom of musicians and leaders in the band community. Are you planning to travel with your group sometime soon? If so, please consider my sponsor, Kaleidoscope Adventures, a full-service tour company specializing in student group travel. With a former educator as its CEO, Kaleidoscope Adventures is dedicated to changing student lives through travel, and they offer high-quality service and an attention to detail that comes from more than 25 years of student travel experience. Trust Kaleidoscope's outstanding staff to focus on your group's one-of-a-kind adventure so that you can focus on everything else. The Everything Band podcast is a proud member of the Music Teachers Development Podcast Network. The Muted Network provides support in the form of audio-on-demand programming designed by and for music educators. You can find more information about our network at mutedpodcasts.com. Before we begin, I'd like to thank Jake Walker and Colin Peters for their contributions to the show, and especially to all of you who are listening. I appreciate your time and hope that you are finding value from these interviews. I rely on word of mouth and social media to bring the show to new listeners. If you think you know one or two people who might find these interviews useful, please let them know about it. You can also help by following me and sharing posts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Remember, help your students live up to the best that is in them through music. And now on to my next guest, Ronnie Wooten. Hi, Ronnie.
Hello, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for joining me.
Glad to be here. Glad to be here.
We were talking before we started that we're on opposite ends of Illinois right now. You're up north and I'm down south here in the state.
Yep. It's like two different countries.
Indeed it is. So Ronnie, can you introduce yourself for the listeners? Tell them who you are.
Well, my name is Ronnie Wooten, and as the students do, Dr. Wooten. I'm a professor of music at Northern Illinois University in DeKalb, Illinois, which is about 60 miles directly west of the city of Chicago. I've been here. This is my 27th year. And, and prior to that, I was director of bands at Florida International University in Miami. And prior to that, for just a year, my first job right out of graduate school was at State University of New York at Fredonia. And then prior to that, I was a graduate assistant at Michigan State University.
What I want to know, Ronnie, is what's your origin story? How did you get involved in music as a child?
You can probably tell by this heavy French accent that I was born and raised in Eastern North Carolina. And some people tell me that they really can't tell, and I can hide it, sometimes. But I grew up in a small town in Eastern North Carolina, Goldsboro, North Carolina. Grew up there, went to school there, the high school, all the way through high school, undergraduate at East Carolina University in Greenville, North Carolina is where I went to school. And I eventually ended up teaching at my old high school. I became the band director there, where I taught for, 8 years as director of instrumental music for grades 8 through 12 in that school district. Right before I went to graduate school at Michigan State. So I taught grades 8 through 12 there. And then on my first job, middle school was at Parker Middle School and Rocky Mount Senior High School. And I don't know if you keep up with Bands of America, but the Rocky Mount Band was the first high school band to win the Grand National Marching Band Championship 3 times in a row. But yeah, Rocky Mount, where I taught grades 6 through 12. And then before going to Goldsboro, where I graduated from, and I was, there for several years. And so I grew up in a family. I'm the only musician. Nobody else. There were 6 of us, 3 boys and 3 girls. So my designation is 5 of 6. So all the girls are older than me, and one brother is younger. Oldest brother and oldest sister are deceased. I miss both of them every day. And so yeah, but I'm the only musical one. And so I grew up in a house, not listening to concert bands or classical music. As a matter of fact, the way that I got started in music, and I think I didn't realize I was musical, for a while. And my family didn't understand that I was musical because we were not a rich family. We were very opposite in a lot of ways. And so it was kind of tough sometimes, but we managed somehow. And so the first instrument that I played was piano. And we never had a piano in my house growing up. And people think, well, that's kind of weird. How'd you learn piano? Whenever I was around a piano, I just had to get to that piano and I'd sit there and I'd mess around. And like I said, when I was in elementary school and all that stuff, I probably started playing piano at my church, or my mother's church, probably age 4 or 5. And I couldn't read music. I didn't know what read music was. Certainly didn't know any of the technical things about music. All I knew is that I could hear it, and I don't have perfect pitch, but I could somehow hear it and sit down at that piano and find it. And so I started playing for the church choir, very sporadically at first. And then, it increased as I got better. And so by the time I was in high school, I was playing at that church plus several other churches. And I remember several times where I'd get a call because somebody's musician, is out of town, and they'd call me Saturday. Well, can you play Sunday? And so there I'd go, playing Sunday with no rehearsal, or maybe rehearsal right before church. So that was my first instrument, the first instrument that I really loved. And when I think about it now, it's quite remarkable how I've developed the way that I have, because I didn't learn a wind instrument until I was in 6th grade, actually between grade 6 and grade 7. And I started, my director, whose last name was what? Wooten. But he was white, but he was my first band director, Mr. Jimmy Wooten. And so I started clarinet the summer between grade 6 and grade 7. Beginning band, he had 2 classes. And so I'd go take my little clarinet, and I still have that clarinet in my closet right now, that Bundy plastic. And it still plays, I still have it. And the only reason that I wanted to be in the band is because all of my closest friends were already in it. And so I just wanted to be where they were. I had no idea that things were going to evolve the way that they did. And even then, I didn't realize I was as musical, I guess, as I was, if that makes any sense. And when I think about things that influenced me and how they influenced me and came into my life, sometimes it's kind of remarkable. And when I start to tell people about it, they think, wow. And then sometimes I stop and I think, wow. But I'm too old now to believe in coincidences. I no longer believe in those. I believe that people meet for a reason, like you and I, and everybody else in my life, and the things that have shaped me and my life and development were supposed to happen. Could things have been better? Yep, it would have been better if we'd had a piano in my house growing up. It would have been better if I had had clarinet lessons, you know, early private lessons early in my clarinet playing career, but all I did, I just loved music, and I wanted to be near it, and I wanted to be around it, and I didn't make the decision until probably it's fairly early, I guess, that I made the decision, definitely by ninth grade, that I wanted to go to college as a music major, and the things that led to that had to do with me winning a scholarship to the summer music camp at East Carolina University between grades 7 and 8. I didn't know what a music camp was. I didn't really know anything about East Carolina University, but I won this $200 scholarship. I think this is way back in the 70s. And, and so I went to this music camp. It was a 2-week camp. And so, my parents drove me up there. I had my little Foot Locker packed and everything, and I was there. And that was the first time that I had been around that number of students who were my age and older, because it was, basically grades. You had to have at least a year of band before you could go up to your senior year in high school. That was the first time really for me that I had been around that many musicians where a lot of them played better than me. So that opened my eyes. I mean, and to find people that were my age and slightly younger, but they played better than me because they came from better backgrounds, or they came from better high school programs or middle school programs. But I didn't know any better, and like I said, I loved it. It was fun, and that was the thing that really made me make the decision to go into music. And like I said, I went to that camp until I got to my right before my senior year in high school. Every year I went to that music camp, and that's how East Carolina University recruited me to go there. And it's one of the best decisions I've ever made. And I got a million stories to tell about what I learned at that camp, who I met, the impact that they had on me, the things that I was exposed to. Because like I said, the high school program that I came from was pretty average. I mean, my high school band director, he just passed away just about 4 months ago. I'm sad, but it was a husband and wife team. And now I can look back and kind of constructively criticize, because they were very young. And, and I had band directors or experiences once as I got older, and I'm like, gosh, I wish they were more like that. But I give them credit and I acknowledge the opportunities that they provided for me. And, and one of the things, and I'll say this, my band director, he was a keyboard major, organ and piano, but he played excellent trumpet and flute. And when I was in 11th grade and he knew that I wanted to major in, and I can't tell you the opportunities that he and his wife gave me: student conductor, drum major, section leader, assistant. He'd hire me during the summer and pay me to help him get the band library organized. That's how I learned to bathe brass instruments. We take those marching horns apart and put them in the ivory liquid and learn how to take those valves out, how to oil them, how to put them back in. So I was helping him with all of that, and plus other stuff. So I give Marshall and Judy Lewis their props. And my junior year, I took piano lessons from him, because I never studied piano until I got to 9th grade. I took piano lessons for probably 6 months, and then at a music store. And so the guy that taught me, he hired me to teach piano. And so I was teaching, beginner level. I mean, I was playing pretty well. I had taught myself to read music. Even before I got in band, I taught myself how to read, and all of that stuff. I was self-taught. And but he hired me to teach piano. So I had probably a dozen piano students at that store. And so I only took lessons from him 1 year. After that, my high school band director agreed to teach me, especially, when I said, oh, I think I want to major in music. So he would give me piano lessons in the high school band room during lunch, sometimes after school, after everybody is gone. And I'll tell you what he did. I had a piano lesson every day. Like during lunch, if he didn't have to go somewhere or whatever, he would put everybody out of the band room and we'd have a piano lesson. If not during lunch, it would be after school. And people say, well, how can you have a piano lesson every day? Because you don't have time to practice in between. But see, we didn't have a piano at home. So I could practice on the piano in the band room. So I had my own set of keys to the band room from like 9th grade until I graduated. Because even after my lesson, he'd finish teaching my lesson, say at 4:00. So he'd have to go home and his wife would come pick him up. I would stay in the band room until 8, 9 o'clock at night practicing, which meant that I had to walk home most of the time, with my books and my instrument or whatever. And I'd be right back there the next morning, on time. Sometimes I'd walk to school, even in the morning because I was in student government and everything else. But I had a lesson. So he made me play all my scales and arpeggios, major and minor. He gave me theory lessons, to kind of, make all of this stuff make sense. And I just can't tell you the foundation that he laid for me. And, I played Beethoven sonatas, movements. I played Mozart. I played Bach 2 and 3 part inventions. And he would make me memorize. And when I'd have a piece learned, he would stop band practice early and say, Ronnie is going to perform for you today. And I'd have to play in front of the whole band. I'm going to play Bach 2-part invention, number 4 in D minor, blah, 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 blah. I'm going to play a movement, the first movement of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. And when I got to college, man, guess who placed out a piano? Me. I knew all my scales, all my arpeggios. I knew all of them and placed out a piano. So I took piano lessons the entire 4 years with this incredible pianist. She was way, way, way too good for me. But I learned from her and she worked me and she treated, even though it was my secondary, because I was a clarinet major, she treated me like a piano major. I had to memorize 1 or 2 pieces a week. I had to play a jury. And this lady specialized in contemporary American piano music specifically. Like she's a specialist in the music of Charles Ives. And so I was exposed to her and I would be so intimidated, but we got to be good friends. I would dress up this is in the old days. For my piano lesson, I would dress up. I would wear a little tie. I ain't do that for my clarinet lesson, but for my piano lesson, I would dress up and she'd be like, what's that cologne you're wearing? Well, would you like a cup of tea? And so we'd have a cup of tea before my lesson. And she'd say, okay, what are you going to play for me today? I'd have to play my scales, arpeggios, whatever, finger exercises. Okay, let's hear some of this Bach. So she had me playing more Bach, well-tempered clavier, more Beethoven, Chopin. And I had to memorize those pieces because I had to play a jury. And so to this day, and I think about how that guides my work as a conductor, because I use the piano a lot, as a conductor. When I'm learning a new score, when I'm getting the sounds and the chords and the voicings in my ear, I rely on the piano. And I'd rather sit at the piano and plunk my way through than listen to a recording of a brand new piece or something that I may or may not know. I'd rather sit at the piano and plunk my way through. And I still prefer, when I'm learning a new piece or just getting something back in my ears again, that's still my preferred way. And the way that this woman taught me and the discipline that she instilled in me is a huge part of my approach now. And man, and I tell you, all of that put me in a good place as a graduate student. Having to learn scores quicker, scores more complex, having to cover a rehearsal for Gene Corcoran or Ken Bloomquist at the last minute, and so again, I wasn't at Juilliard, I wasn't at Eastman, but the people that I met, I'm thankful. I was thankful then, but I'm even more thankful right now because I can look back and see the huge impact that they had on me. And I hope that's enough. But that's my early foundation. But it's amazing. And like I said, I grew up in a house. I remember watching Leonard Bernstein young people's concerts. I barely knew what an orchestra was, but I knew I loved those concerts on TV. And I'd sit there, and I still think those are some of the most remarkable performances of my life. And I still like to go back every now and then and watch them. And, he was a genius. He was a master. And my siblings weren't watching that. They were listening to Earth, Wind, and Fire and Aretha Franklin and Parliament and Funkadelic. I grew up with all of that too, which I love. But here I was, this little black kid, who likes Beethoven and Schubert, in addition to all that stuff, who started out as a gospel piano player in a country church in North Carolina. So I guess that's not, a very traditional background for a symphonic wind ensemble conductor and a doctor of musical arts in instrumental conducting and blah, 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 and Dr. Wooten and this and that. But all of that stuff, man, was so foundational, more foundational than I had any idea that it would be. And I'll tell you just a quick little aside. The first time that I conducted Lincolnshire Posey with my high school band, and I wanted to do in North Carolina on the list, Lincolnshire Posey was obviously a level 6, the highest grade level, if you play 4 of the movements. So you could play any 4. So what was it if you played the whole thing? Grade 12? Well, all of them are grade 12. But so I decided to play 2, 3, 5, and 6. Because and I got another story about why I did that. But I was thinking about this as I'm anticipating talking with you, and I'm teaching this piece to this band, in this small town that and had great kids back then, and I'm teaching them this music. They've never heard of Granger and Lincolnshire Posey and blah 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 blah. And I made a bet with my clarinet section in the third movement. I said, "You all are not counting this very well." I said, "So we're gonna have a little wager here." I said, "We're going to learn this." I said, "I'm going to learn all the clarinet parts at the piano, both hands in the third movement, and you all are going to learn your part. And on a designated day, we're going to have a contest to see who can play it without making a mistake." And they were like, "Yeah, we'll do it. And I said, "And the other thing, whoever wins has to take the other for pizza." I even specified the pizza place. And I was like, "You are not going to beat me, just so you know." And I sat at that piano, because this is when Lincolnshire Posey, there was only a condensed score, the old Shermer condensed score. So I'm sitting there and I'm plunking away and I'm learning those parts and those meter changes and all that stuff. So on competition day, I stopped band early. And I said, "We have a little friendly contest going on here." And I told the band, of course they knew. And so I said, "Okay, clarinets, you all get to go, woodwind section." And of course I had been teaching them. I said, "Y'all get the benefit of me teaching you. I'm not going to teach you wrong because I want you to play it right." But they lost the contest. Not a huge, terrible loss. I didn't make any mistakes because I was like, these kids are not going to beat me. So they had to take me to my favorite pizza place and pay for dinner. And I said, you're not getting out of this. I'm not that, oh, well, that's okay. No. What day and time are we going to get pizza? And they did it. And do you know now, all those years later, when I go home and I run into kids, they're asking me, do you have any recordings of Lincolnshire Posey? Do you have, and they remember these pieces. And, and given the demographic of that school at the time, I don't know. It's a lot different now than it was when I was there. And it's certainly a lot different from when I was a high school student. But I wouldn't trade my experience with those kids for anything. And now, after all these years, some of them majored in music, some of them didn't. Some of them went into service, some of them got married, some of them went to college. And when I see them, it's always a positive experience, reminiscing. And and I'm glad that they remember Lincolnshire Posey and William Byrd Suite and some of the other music that we played. I don't care whether you majored in music or not, because that's not why we do this. And I'm pleased to say that I think I had a little bit of something influence in their lives. And I look at former students and what they're doing now, medical doctors, lawyers, some of them are music teachers, some of them are housewives, husbands, plumbers, and I wouldn't change any of it. Not at all. So I've had, some, again, probably not your straight path from point A to point B, but life is like that. You've got these goals and you set them. Well, when I'm 35, I'm going to have this done. And when I'm 37, I'm going to have this done. 9 times out of 10, none of that works out the way you plan. But you still end up through all these roundabout ways, kind of in the same place. Could experiences have been better? Possibly. Being in a different place, I would have met different people. I would have come in contact with people, other than the ones that I actually met and have gotten to know over all these years. But when I look back, I have no regrets. I really don't. And I wasn't a perfect teacher, and I had to learn just like you and everybody else as we're starting. But I had some great influences, and I'm fortunate to have had people in my life who took the interest in me and recognized things in myself before I even recognized them. And so, right. And so, and I, like I said, and obviously, I was being totally crazy when I said I have no stories. I have so many stories. And now that I'm old, a lot of these stories are connected in ways that I had no way of even anticipating that they would be connected at this point in my life. And so these are some of the things that I try to share with students that I teach. When I go out to do an honor band or to judge a festival or whatever, and when I'm guest conducting and I'm talking about this piece, well, I did this for the first time and I'm telling this story. Because some of the teachers that I had, that's how they pulled me in, a story they told. And it makes the music and the experience so much more memorable.
Let me start back in the beginning. And,
okay.
This is a question, and I'll defer to you if you don't want to answer it. It's fine. I understand. But, there's certainly the church experience resonates with a lot of musicians, both white and black. But
yes.
One thing I'm going to say is that overwhelmingly, my black guests have mentioned the church as a foundational experience. And that's a common thread. And I'm wondering if you had any thoughts on why in your community, that's so important.
So historically, the black church has been a connector of the black community. And I don't know whether you saw that special a few weeks ago with Henry Louis Gates entitled The Black Church. It was a PBS special. It was 2 nights, probably about 4 hours or so. And so I'm sitting there listening to these people singing in these country churches, a cappella sometime with piano playing, sometime with organ playing. And I'm reliving my earliest memories as a musician, growing up. And so it's always, and in a lot of ways, it's still a pillar of the Black community. Not in the same way it was back then, because now we got computers and Facebook and cell phones and all that kind of stuff. There's still, what's the word, vestiges, remnants of that left. It's not as strong as it was. But that's part of my life that it was very important. So when I go out and conduct Dwayne Milburn's hymn song suite, American Hymn Song Suite, I could tell those kids about those songs because some of them I played when I couldn't read music. Well, something else that I remember, I can't remember where I heard the piece for the first time, but the first time that I heard Donald Grantham's piece, Southern Harmony, I fell in love with it immediately. And especially because of the second movement. And I don't know how well you know that piece, but it's like almost like a hold down. And the band has to clap and stamp and stomp their feet, at certain points in that piece. And so the first time I said, I love this. And so I couldn't wait to conduct that piece. And so I told the band, I said, you know what? I said, this is the music I grew up with. I said, and you got to get these claps in the right place. You got to get these foot stomps in the right place. I said, because we don't want da 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 da. I said the feel is da 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 da. I said the feel of that music completely changes. And so you bring that cultural tidbit to the table. But I do the same thing when I do Gershwin, Cuban Overture. I bring in the jazz guy to talk about clave and that type of thing. And one year that I did it here, fortunately, one of our percussion teachers was Puerto Rican. And I said, can you come in and sit in the wind ensemble? I said, and we'll play the piece for you. And then we'll have you come up and work with them and blah, 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 blah. So he listened and he came and he was a wonderful percussionist. I hate when he left. But he came, and the first thing he said, could you put your instruments on the floor beside you? He made them stand up and he made the connection between physicality and the feel of that music. Now, I had done pretty well with it, but when we played it again before he left, the feel was completely different.
Yeah, that sone rhythm, that salsa feel, that's all dancing. That's all how you feel it.
Exactly. And so that's why, and so that gives me the opportunity when I'm out doing an honor band, depending on what we're playing, and I can bring all of these things into getting these kids to play this music as quickly as possible. Because sometimes you got one day festival, sometimes it's a weekend, sometimes if it's the Kentucky All-State, it's like 2 days, 2 weeks. No, it's not. But the Kentucky All-State was probably one of the most generous rehearsal schedules of any all-state group that I've ever done, and they were fabulous, But you get to bring these things in, and like I said, I can't think of any circumstances where helping these students understand the connection between culture, whatever it is, and the music that's sitting in front of them, how important that is. And that's something I figured out about myself long ago. I learned by connection. That's one of the ways that I learned. And I also figured out it's the way a lot of people learn. When you can connect them to something, especially something they already know about, if you can start there, you can get them from the unknown to the new known. Because that's what I tell my music ed students. That's what is the definition of learning? You start with what they know. You take them through this thing called lesson plans and practice and rehearsal through the unknown until you arrive at the new, N-E-W, the new known. That's what the definition of learning is. And so I'm the guy who's always trying to connect as quickly as I possibly can, and it requires, a lot of preparation, which is what I'm supposed to do. This is my profession. This is the way I was taught and trained. And it has not failed me yet. And I've conducted, man, in places. I remember the first time I went to Rhode Island to conduct the Southern New England Honor Band. I was there for 4 days. First time I had ever stayed at a bed and breakfast. And so there I was, my country self, at a New England bread. So I call it my New England experience. That's what I told the host. Well, I look forward to my New England experience because I'd never been to Rhode Island. For 4 days, I was the only Black person I saw. But who cares? Because that's not what I focus on. I focused on the music and making connections with those kids. And I teased them. They'd say, "Car." Well, Dr. Wooten, are you starting in bar? I'm like, bar? What's a bar? What's a car? And so I kind of tease them and they chuckle and they kind of tease me about my Southern accent. Those kids, the last day, when we finished that concert, those kids came backstage with their parents who wanted to take pictures with me and shake my hand because my daughter said that she had the most fun here and she learned and had the best time. Will you allow us to take a picture? Of course, ma'am. And so wherever I've gone, I've been, not to brag or anything, but that's what I find helps me to be successful. And I see other people who don't do it. None of us do it the same way, nor should we be expected to. I just know that I figured out some things to get things to happen quickly and to try as best I can to make this experience meaningful, different, fun, because it's okay to have fun, even though some people are like, no, you can't have fun. Can you imagine doing an all-state band with William Rebelli back in 1960? And I never got to meet him, unfortunately, which I regret, but I know enough people who were his students and they love him and they revere him. Well, he was mean. And the stuff that he got away with, we can't get away with that now. And I don't want to get away with that. Now, sometimes it gets intense and the room gets a little dark. And I'll say to the kids, I'm like, there's clouds in here. There's thunderstorm, there's rain. But if you miss that note one more time, and the kids laugh and we move on, and guess what? They stop missing that note. Exactly. And I find that overwhelmingly, most people respond positively to that type of thing. And now everything is not a cakewalk, or wonderful, but I've had more success than not success using the types of things that I've shared with you.
So you said a couple things there. The first thing I really admire is that, you talked about the idea that, education is about relearning the experiences we already have. I think, at least when I was coming up, I almost always felt like the empty vessel, which is completely the wrong way to teach, right? Like you're filling kids up, but it's not that. You're taking their previous experiences and reconnecting them and reconstructing what they already know. And I think that really is an empowering way to teach students. And I'm not sure enough young teachers think that way early on.
I've been trying to think of a sophisticated way to say this, but basically, suppose education was simply a matter of teachers and students reminding each other of what they already know. And I probably didn't say that well, and I'm trying to think of a way to say it so I can be like sophisticated and and dignified, but reminding them, I don't know. I'm still thinking about that. I'm still kicking it around, and so maybe one of these days before I pass away to glory, I will come up with a clever, memorable, because you want it to be memorable, way to say that. And if you do that, it takes care of a lot of stuff, man, that we have to deal with: race, gender, ethnicity. If I'm helping you remember who you are, that I think that tends to be a positive thing. And it hopefully, and it's not going to be perfect in every situation, but helping students remember what they already knew, or, well, you already know more about this piece than you thought because it came out of this tradition. And you go to the piano, well, this is the theme that this piece is based on, and you play it. Well, this piece, one of the classes I'm teaching now, we were talking, it's a rock and roll appreciation class. Look, me teaching that. And so we were talking about cover songs. And so I told the students, I said, you got to know what a cover is and blah, 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 blah. Okay. And we listened to Elvis Presley singing Hound Dog. And then we listened, I'm like, well, do you know that Big Mama Thornton sung that before Elvis? And they're like, no, we didn't know. So I played Big Mama Thornton, doing Hound Dog. And I told them one day, I said, okay, I got, so I gave them an assignment. They had to find covers and who did them first and where they came from, blah, 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 blah. I said, I got a cover that none of y'all are going to know. So I played Bach. Ding, da, 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 ding, dum, bum, minuet, da, 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 da. Then I played Diana Ross and the Supremes. How gentle is the rain, ooh, that falls softly. That's Bach. And the students are like, well, first of all, they don't know who Bach is. Sometimes a lot of times they don't know who Diana Ross and the Supremes are. But when they see the connection, I think it makes it more memorable. And so those are the types of things that I try to share, and the way that I share them, even in a concert band rehearsal or a woodwind sectional, or in a methods class or conducting class, when I'm talking about gesture and how your body moves and nonverbal communication and all these things, to help them make connections. And I think that is so critical.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing you mentioned, and this is something that's kind of my soapbox at the moment, is you mentioned coming into band late, like you were only a year behind. And one of the things that I think we really need to deal with in music education is the fact that we're losing relevance a little bit with students. And so I have kind of a two-part question. One is, what do you do with the students who aren't in band if you're a high school teacher, high school band director? And then the other is, how do you make your band program more welcoming for those students who are starting late and they might feel maybe they don't belong because they don't play as well as everyone around them?
That's interesting because when I was teaching high school, it was kind of in the day where if you were in the band, you were in the band. You did the marching band in the fall, and then after, right before Thanksgiving, if your football team wasn't in the playoff, you converted to a concert band. And now, of course, that has changed, and so kids can. And I remember when that change was coming through, because it devastated a lot of band programs, because kids that simply did not want to be in marching band or in concert band. And another thing, something that I've noticed in living all the places I've lived, marching band in the South, kids love it. But up here in Illinois, in Northern Illinois, I remember the first time I went to Nutria High School, and not to, call anybody out. It's not a criticism. And so I'm there to see my student teacher, and I'm walking around between classes. I'm looking at pictures on the wall. These pictures go back, because they've been wonderful for years. And so I said to John Thompson, my friend, I said, well, how many kids do you have in the marching band? And he looked at me and he said, North Shore kids don't do marching band. And he said, and just the way that he said it, and I'm like, okay, that's what he said. So I came through at a time when it was a little bit easier. As I was getting ready to go back to graduate school, things were starting to change. So kids who didn't want to be in band, I started teaching them music appreciation, or I started teaching a music theory, because some of them, that's all they wanted, and it kept them connected. My high school principal used to say to me, and he's the best administrator I have ever worked for in all of my years, God rest his soul, Mr. Patrick McKinley Best. because I learned more from that man about teaching, life, and everything, you know. And he said to me, and I remember we'd be talking, and he said, yeah. He said, when I was in high school, he said, I played percussion in the band. He said, I didn't start taking band until 9th grade. And see, and back in those days, the 50s and 40s, you know, and he would always say to me, Ron, I think you need to start a beginning band class in 9th grade. He always used to say that to me. And I never did. But you think about it. That kid, that 9th grader compared to that 5th or 6th grader is a bigger person physically, has better control of their motor skills, their mental skills. That kid is going to progress 10 times faster than that 5th grade. I found that even when I was teaching middle school, because I taught my first year teaching, I taught grade 6. I taught all the 6th grade bands in that middle school. We had A Day and B Day. I had 6 periods of band. Each one of those classes had 35 or 40 kids in it. I had 6 on Monday, Wednesday, 6 classes, 6 different classes on Tuesday, Thursday. Then I had to teach a beginning 7th grade class. My first year teaching, what I saw even from grade 6 to grade 7 is how quickly the 7th graders made more progress because they were older, more mature people. Even 1 year made the difference. So I hope that I answered, but what I was starting to do, like I said, was to include music appreciation, music theory. I wanted to have like a piano lab, and my school never had an orchestra. That was, if I had stayed in that school, say, and taught there for 25 years, that was already on my agenda to get a string program in that school district. It was, I mean, I didn't talk to a lot of people about it, but that was on my radar to get that done, to bring something else. Because the choir was very strong in that school. And the band, you know, got stronger, I'm proud to say, while I was there. So, you know, I look now, and you're right. We are losing relevance because kids have so many more things to choose from. And it used to drive me crazy when a kid in the 7th grade, and you've got boys baseball, boys track, boys this, boys golf, boys that. So by the time they get to high school, they've done everything. But you've still got all these boys track, boys golf, boys tennis. And, you know, and so these kids, they get turned off. And so don't be surprised when they choose things other than band or things other than music, you know, and I still get kind of, you know, a little upset about that. But hey, you got to adjust. You got to roll with the times, you know, whatever they are, and try to do things in a way that you have input, as opposed to somebody imposing these things or these programs or these standards or whatever on you with no input from you. So I'd rather I always thought in terms of trying to get out a little ahead, trying to anticipate a little bit, trying to stay relevant. And, you know, because everybody doesn't want to be in the band or the orchestra or the choir. And then the ones that are there, they're there because of what I joined for in the first place. My friends are there. It's fun. I don't want to major in music. It's fun to me. So some are going to take it seriously and play well. Some are going to take it because it's fun, and they're still going to play well. Some are going to be horrible, you know, but they're going to be faithful. They're going to participate. They're going to fill out that curve in the halftime show. So you don't have a lot of gaps, you know? And so again, I just, one word that I use with my students, and they always laugh, and I talk about cookie cutter. I'm like, we can't be cookie cutters. And we can't train people in our university, in our music education programs to be cookie cutters. And I'm sad to say, man, and not that I know everything or I've been everywhere, there's a lot of cookie cutters still going on. And these students, and they graduate and they teach because Dr. So-and-so told me to do this. Well, guess what? It's not working. Your band sucks. Your choir sounds like crap, because you're trying to do what Dr. So-and-so said. Dr. So-and-so is not necessarily telling you something wrong, but I still say, and I used to hear my teachers say, well, you really don't start teaching until sometime after year 3. That's when you start being adventurous and start trying stuff and stop using the teaching of instrumental music. Every time you have a problem with your flute intonation, you got to pull up the flute chapter in that book to see what to do. And so sometimes that gets me into trouble because some students, they get a little frustrated with me because I don't have a 1, 2, 3 solution or A, B solution or a black, white solution. And they get frustrated because so many times they want to be told, if your flutes are out of tune, this is what you need to do. And I'm like, you can't teach that way. And I will be doing you a disservice if I prepared you to teach that way.
I want to ask you something that I was asked just recently. And it's about building a program and having a vision. How would you advise a young band director to create that vision in their head that you and I know is important to building something?
I try sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly, depending on who it is. So many times we put people out there, we graduate people whose focus is to go out there and have a grade 6 band or orchestra or choir. And so that's what they're focused on, which, what does that have to do with anything? How about instilling in these kids an appreciation of music and its functions in society, the impact that it has on us as human beings, the way that it makes us feel, the way it connects us to our humanness, But so many times they graduate and that's the goal, to have this band at contests that gets a 1. And I sit there, man, at these contests and I hear these groups and everything is flawless. Everything is in this very limited range, not too loud, not too soft. And it sounds like it might as well be a recording. There's no nuance. It's very sterile sounding. I'd rather that it be a little bit out of tune and have some spirit, or like I say, some juice, And so, but we, we sometimes get the wrong vision. But you think about college music programs, and we have our orchestra and our wind ensemble, and we have these, we've got 3 concerts this semester, and they've got to be flawless because they're going to be broadcast live on the internet and blah, 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 blah. And so even at the college level, in some ways, we continue to perpetrate that. And I said to the wind ensemble years ago, I said, there's nothing in the description for this class that says that we have to present public performances. I have yet to see, and there are always exceptions, but here where I am, there's nothing. And so what would happen to the orchestra if they didn't play 3 concerts a semester or any concerts a semester? And so when you start talking about vision, you've got to have vision. You've kind of got to have an idea of where you want to go, what types of values and standards and things that you want to instill in these kids. And there's a lot of ways to get there. But sometimes, and I'll criticize us, and I put myself in there as part of the us, the way that we attempt to help them achieve this is not always the best way. And sometimes we end up just perpetrating this same system, and it's not. And so what happens when you've had 5 years of consecutive superior ratings at festival? What are you going to do now? And so, right. And so how does that fit into whatever your vision is for your program? Does it fit in? Is that all? Is that your ultimate goal for your program, to get consecutive ones, superior ratings at festival? I hope not. That's so important, and we throw around that word philosophy, and something, even when I used to teach the Intro to Music Ed course, and maybe you shouldn't call it a philosophy, but I would make them, before the end of that course, they'd have to write their philosophy of music teaching and learning. And these kids would say, just like I used to do, music is so important in my life. Music is the universal language. Without music in my life, I would just die. And so here I go, when I'm giving feedback and I'm handing the papers for them to revise, I'm like, you would not die if music was not in your life. You would die if you didn't have water, air, and food. But you would not die. I said, so I understand what you're saying and why you're saying it, but you can't say that in Dr. Wooten's Intro to Music Ed class 150. You can't say that because it's not true. And some of them, and that's why some of them like, well, Dr. Wooten is not a good teacher. Music is not the universal language. It is not. It is a universal means of expression. And every culture on this planet has something that they call music. If it was universal, everybody should like every kind of music that they hear. But we don't. So it's not universal. And I always, try to make it a little funny. And I say, if I'm a parent, if I'm a pygmy growing up in Papua New Guinea, why would I play the music of Mozart, talking about the Mozart effect, about all that? Why would I play the music of Mozart in my Papua New Guinea pygmy baby's nursery, thinking that's maybe I should play, if I'm going to play music at all, maybe it should be some pygmy folk music. That might stimulate that kid's synapses in his brain or her brain. They're hearing something, they don't know what it is, but what makes you think that Mozart is going to do that? And so trying to get people to think broader is difficult sometimes. I'm not going to give up. And I think a lot broader now than when I first started. And I tell them about my first year, this bulletin board I had, music, the universal language. And I had these figures. There was a Native American, there was a Black figure, there was a white figure, there was a girl, there was a boy. The universal, it was beautiful. And it was so beautiful, if I do say so myself, I left it up the whole year. Look, when the school board would come through and come to my room, there it is. Oh, I love this bulletin board. I do not believe that.
So, Reimer or Elliott?
Elliott is my idol. And I think he's still alive. I mean, I like both of them, but Elliott, when I read Music Matters, it shook me, as the kids say.
There's a lot of good in Reimer, but it's really not about that.
Right. And Elliott, I mean, he gets it. And I think that he's communicating something to us that works or has the potential to work in a lot of places and a lot of situations.
Yeah, and it covers in a more diverse way because it's covering practice, not things.
Exactly. I mean, just the whole concept of musicer. And when I say that in class and the kids snicker, I was like, what are you snickering at? Teachers teach, preachers preach. I said, musicers, music. And then we talk about musicking. How do you music? What are the ways that you can music? What did they say? Oh, I can sing, I can perform. Is that all you can do with music is perform? And so it gets I introduced that stuff, man, in Intro to Music Education.
That philosophy stuff's really important to bake in.
That's how I think about it. Trying to get these kids, because some of them, their freshman year, they don't know whether they want to be a band director or a general music teacher. And I've had so many kids, and you've seen this too. They come here, well, I'm going to be Joe, band director. And by the time they student teach and graduate, I want to teach general music.
Yeah, they're teaching kindergartners.
And I've got some kids out there, I'm so proud of them, especially some of my male students who are teaching general music, loving it, and teaching the spots off the page.
Kids are fun, man. The young kids are fun.
They are fun. They are, because they don't mind hearing the truth.
It's interesting that you say that you taught that in your intro to music ed, because I almost think it's something that should be taught to every music major, because it applies across the board.
That's exactly right.
It's not just music ed.
And how many performance majors come back 2 years after they graduate because they're not in the Chicago Symphony like they thought? And they come back, well, Dr. Wooten, what can I do to get certified? And now, because you didn't take any of the classes while you were here, it's going to take you 2.5, 3 years. When while you were a student here, you could have double majored and some of the stuff would have counted twice. And sometimes, and I've had students who do it and do it very well. And then others like, well, I really don't want to spend that much time and that much money. So I agree with you, man. I agree. Try to get them out of these boxes, out of the cookie cutter. I compare it to the NBA or the NFL. Look, how many kids start out in Little League and they or their parents are convinced that this kid is so great, he's going to be in the NFL. What percentage of all the people that play Little League and this league and that league actually end up there? Music is the same way.
Yep. Yeah, probably even worse.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So I try to be real. I'm sorry.
No, and I think it's important. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't be teaching these kids. I mean,
Yes.
They have a right to chase their dream.
Yeah. And you don't want to do anything to discourage them.
No. It's a balance, right? That's a hard
because something an old band director friend of mine used to talk about, what he called the violation of expectancy. Where here comes this kid, he's from the worst home life, he's from the worst school, but he is one of the most gifted clarinet players. So he's violating expectancy. And he'd always say, I love it when kids violate expectancy.
Hey there, everyone. My name is Ann Molesky, and I'm the host of the Anna Krusik Podcast, another podcast in the Muted Network. It's my mission to help music teachers be more purposeful, sequential, and joyful in each and everything they do as teacher musicians. Join me every Thursday as I share tips, tricks, and meaningful conversations with other music teachers about how to make the general music classroom more intentional and impactful for both you and your students.
All right, so let's get on to these final questions, because, boy, you draw me into these conversations here, Ron.
Well, you see how shy I am.
That's all right. So the first of these questions I ask everybody, Ronnie, is where do you draw the line between healthy and unhealthy competition in music?
I draw the line at the competition should be with yourself. Are you better on Friday than you were on Monday? Are you better on Tuesday than you were on Monday? Do your kids know better, more? Are you teaching better? It should be about you. I mean, and I've done my share of marching band competitions where this band is first and that band is second. But I learned, and before I stopped teaching public school, every year I would do fewer and fewer marching band competitions. And by the time my last year that I actually taught high school, my band went to 2 competitions. I didn't go to either one because I was judging in other parts of the state. So I let the assistant go with them. And so, of course, somebody's going to be first, somebody's going to be second and third. And the kids like that and all, but, and I did the best that I can to teach them as well as I could. But I understood very quickly that is not what this is about, and so the competition should be against you. When you go to Concert Band Festival, that's kind of what it is, right? You got a Division I. Well, 5 other schools got Division Is. So that's the way I think of it. The competition should be internal.
All right. So the next question is one that I bring it up often that band directors like to joke about being the first car in the parking lot and the last one out of the parking lot. And so how have you managed to find a work-life balance in your life? And whatever that means, it doesn't mean 50-50, it just means how have you found balance?
I tell you, and you know I've got a story about this. When I
I'm gathering that.
when I started teaching at my high school, I remember one day I was in the principal's secretary. She was the one that kept track. If you needed a sub, she was the one that you had to contact, and she'd get the sub and everything. Whenever you were doing professional travel, you had to turn in your paperwork into her. And I remember I was this type. I was the first one in the parking lot and the last one to leave. And sometimes I couldn't help it. Sometimes that's the way it was. But what I learned definitely by my third year is that I would be out there on holidays. I would be out there on weekends. And so what I learned is that every time that you're there in that band room, there's going to be something that you can do. There's going to be something that needs to be done. And I remember when I was in the office and I was talking to the principal's secretary. And so this woman came in and she had taught my older siblings. She was head of our business department in the high school. Wonderful teacher, wonderful lady. And so she came in there and she said to the secretary, she said, "Peggy, put me down. I'm going to be absent next Thursday and Friday." Peggy took out the little book or whatever, and she marked it down, Mrs. Smith, blah, 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 blah. And I'm thinking, I thought you had to fill out this form and do all this stuff to, when you're going to be. And I said, "Peggy, I'm going to be absent so-and-so and so-and-so." Peggy took out the book and wrote it. I mean, of course, you got to do it officially. But I saw, first of all, it freaked me out because I was the person who never took sick leave, even when I was sick sometime. Only took personal leave when I had to. And so my best friend, who's not with us anymore, God rest his soul, we used to do these things called mental health days. Always at the end of marching season. He was a high school band director just like me. And so as soon as the last marching contest was over, we would schedule a mental health day. He taught right outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, in the western part of the state. I taught in the eastern part. And so we came to this agreement. We're going to meet at such and such a hotel in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Whoever got there first, and we agreed what weekend it was going to be. As soon as you leave school on that Friday, if you weren't going to take the day off, whoever got to the hotel first and checked in would go and make sure that there were appropriate beverages in the room, salty snacks. And so by the time the second person got there, those things were already in the room. And we would go down there and we would go to the beach in Myrtle Beach and we'd eat out and we'd eat at restaurants and we'd have and just unwind. Sunday, we'd check out of the hotel. He'd go back to Charlotte. I'd go back. And we were right there teaching those kids on Monday. We used to do that every year. And I'm glad I learned that. And I tell students now, you've got to learn how to take time for yourself. And something that I kind of had to find out the hard way, and I won't go into detail, but if you allow yourselves, you can be there in that school all the time. And you've got to set boundaries. You have to do that. And it sounds simple, but it's so easy to get caught up because I was kind of getting caught up. And I'm glad that I had some people around me to kind of pull me back and say, you know what? And I found too, when I kind of step back a little bit, I don't have to have my finger in everything that happens in the band room. And so what did that do? That opened up my kids to develop more leadership skills, to develop, independent thinking skills, problem solving skills. And in some ways, I got more done in the classroom stepping back a little bit than when I was there all the time, if that makes any sense. And so it's absolutely critical. And I think even more now in this age of information and stuff, I mean, it is very easy. And it is not, I saw something on Facebook a few days ago, and it says something like people need to stop glorifying overworking or something like that. I didn't say it right, but I typed amen, you know, as if that is a badge of honor. And some people can handle it. A lot of people cannot handle it, you know, and it's not some badge of honor, you know, just because you're the first one in the parking lot and the last one to leave. It's not some badge of honor. What it's going to do is hasten you more quickly towards burnout. And so like I said, I had to learn, and I'm not going into any details, but I kind of had to learn the hard way in some ways. And I tell students to do that, you know, and I realize that music is all I do. When I'm not in there, I'm studying a score. I'm you know, watching this video. I'm listening to this recording. And sometimes, and I find when I drive in the car right now, like long distances, it's very seldom I listen to music. I'll keep the radio on talk radio or nothing at all, you know? And so there's got to be, and it's never 50-50. I guess it's just like being married. When is it ever 50-50? Sometimes it might be 70-30. It might be 60-40. It's going to fluctuate. It has to.
And earlier in your career, you're going to work harder than later in your career. That's just,
exactly.
That's because you build up a repertoire of shortcuts and tricks and ways to teach right. that you don't need to build up anymore. You've got a repository of knowledge that you're drawing on.
And one of my great students who's doing excellent work out there right now, and I tell him, I will never work that hard again.
All right, Ronnie, what do you think are the challenges facing music education and band, and what can we do to fix those or to meet those challenges?
I think we have to help. Here I go with connections again. Something that I believe in talking about in the intro to music ed course and even in graduate courses. Talk to me about how music, what are some of the functions of music in society? I throw that question out there just to see what I'm going to get. Oh, well, you know, music is entertainment. Okay, that's one way. And so they usually get the typical ones, and I'm kind of counting on them to get those. But then I start pushing it like, okay, well, what about music as a form of protest, right? Especially now. How about music as ritual? How about music as ceremony, celebration, to mark a special event? Happy birthday to you. That's music as marking a special event. And to get them thinking of how music functions in society. And that usually gets off to a pretty good discussion. And so again, I try to, so many times we in music, we can kind of be an island. We can be our own island. Well, the music room is over in the corner of the building, in the booth in the back, in the corner in the dark. And so we got to be our own island, and it's us against the world. There is some of that's true, but that can't be all it is. And so I think it's important for us as music educators to not bury ourselves in the sand, to not behave and teach as if we are living under a rock or in a cave somewhere. Because these kids now are exposed to 10,000 times more information than you were exposed to when you were in 7th grade. And you were exposed more than me, because I'm older than you. You were exposed to more things. And so we can't act as if we live in a bubble. And I think that's a big challenge, because I think so many times a lot of people are still trying to do that, you know? And you think about, you go back and you read history and you say, oh, well, William, the Joliet, Illinois band produced 36 consecutive Division I ratings from 1925 until blah, 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 blah. And that's a great thing. And we commend the Joliet band. Okay, but now what? And kids don't have time for that. In 1940, kids didn't have internet and Facebook and TikTok and all these other things. They didn't have all these things to claim their attention. And so the same things that worked then, some of them still work now, but a lot of them don't. And so we've got to come out of these old paradigms. I'm not saying throw them all out, because you don't throw everything out. You don't throw the baby and the bathwater out, but you have to, like you said earlier, have some kind of vision, some kind of idea of what you want your program to accomplish, what you want to impart to those students. And we've got to, that's, to me, I don't know whether all that makes sense, but that's all of that rolled into one ball is a major challenge to me. Because like you said, in so many instances, we're becoming less relevant. We talk about STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And then they STEAM. How often do you hear people talk about STEAM, where they add that A in there, that arts? Still, the focus is on science, technology, engineering, and math. Music is still considered a frill. And I tell the students, when you have to constantly defend your program, you're in trouble. If that's what you spend most of your time doing, is defending your program to your principal, to your school board, to your superintendent, or whoever, you're in trouble already. And so I don't know. I hope that some of that kind of makes a little bit of sense. But these challenges, we have got to go with the flow. We've got to adjust, to changes that are going on in the world, in our lives, in our communities. We've got to adjust. And I always say, everything is a continuum, and all we can do is try to stay in balance, try to stay in balance. Because the minute you go to this extreme, okay, there's trouble. Then you go to this other extreme on the end of the continuum, there's trouble. So try to come back toward the middle and balance. And I think that applies to just life in general. And so I try in what I do to impart truths like that, if it's a truth. I try to share those things and try to get students and others to buy into that. Now, I'm not sure what that directly has to do with the Persichetti Symphony, the last chord of the Persichetti Symphony, that 23rd chord. But give me a minute and I'll figure out a way to connect it.
So, Ronnie, I just invented a time machine, and I'm going to take us back to the afternoon of your high school graduation. What are you telling yourself?
I'm going to college, and I'm going to be the best band director with the best band in America, certainly in North Carolina. That's what I was saying to myself.
Right. What are you telling yourself now? If you could go back and talk to yourself, what would you tell that young Ronnie? That
is so minuscule in the total scheme of things. That is the total. And sometimes I say to my students, and they get surprised, I said, if they told me next week that I had to go back and teach high school again, or middle school, or elementary school, I said, you know what I would want to teach? General music. And then they want to know why. Well, you're a wind ensemble conductor. You got a doctorate in conducting. I said, because now I understand something that I didn't quite understand. Teaching general music gives me more access to more students. And so I'm able to have, hopefully, more of an impact as an advocate of music and the arts. That is more interesting and exciting to me than after all these years going back being Joe high school band director. First of all, I'm too old. I can't march with the marching band out there like I used to. And hell, I don't want to. I no longer want to do that. So what I'm trying to look at, I'm trying to think broader. And my mama used to say, when you know more, you can do more. When you know better, you can do better. And so that's kind of how I look at it. And so now I'm more interested in creating consumers of music and arts. I would love to go back into a school district and be director of fine arts for a school district, because it's going to allow me to use all these years and all these experiences that I've had doing all the things I've done. It's going to allow me to use a lot of those skills exactly as I've already used them, always used them. And it's going to allow me to use those skills that I've developed in ways that I've never been able to use them. Right now, at this point in my life, and I'm 915 years old, that is more interesting to me than being Joe, middle school band director with 15 consecutive superior ratings.
Comes back to that, what we talked about earlier about the relevance.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, Ronnie. So this is a question I ask to kind of get at what people sort of value as a special work, not necessarily their favorite. But if you had a choice, what would be the final work for wind ensemble or band that you'd want to conduct or perform?
When I saw that question, I said, Jesus wept. And I'm like, why would you box me in to something as difficult as that? See, I can't give you one piece.
Okay.
Because
can you give me two?
You're being difficult.
Of course I am. That's the job here. That's the gig, Ronnie.
It's just like when students ask me, well, Dr. Wooten, what's your favorite kind of music? And when I say to them, I can find things that I like and love in pretty much every genre. And I can, and I guess maybe sometimes they think that's a cop-out, but it really isn't, because I know so much more. I mean, I know so much more about what's out there. And something that I constantly remember, and I said this to myself when I finished my last comprehensive exam and passed all those, and I was Dr. Wooten, everything except the paper. And I said, I know a lot of stuff. But what I know is a teeny, tiny, tiny little bit of what is actually out there to be known. And you pat yourself on, oh, well, you got your doctorate. Oh, okay. And I went through some stuff. It was not the easiest thing. It was tough, but you figured some stuff out. And when you understand more about what is actually out there, and you understand that your little bit of what you know is so insignificant. And again, I quote my mama a lot, and she say, son, there's enough she's deceased now, there's enough that you don't know to create a whole nother universe.
Well, Ronnie, I'm going to tell you a story now.
Okay, please.
So when I was an undergraduate, I was taking piano lessons from a gentleman in my hometown. I took him in the summer and over winter break, that kind of stuff. Yeah. And he was a German pianist, and he grew up as a child in the end of World War II. So he was like a young teen during the end of World War II. Mm-hmm. And after the war, he went to music school, and his first gig was as the rehearsal pianist for Carl Orff in Munich before he emigrated to the United States. Wow. And opened up a music school, like a high school music academy in California.
Yeah.
So he was at the end of his life, of course, when I was taking piano lessons, and he taught me a ton about teaching. But I remember one time, I don't know, I was probably my junior year of college, and I just heard the Debussy String Quartet for the first time or something, and I had the score. I had the little mini, the little one, the Schirmer score. And I just loved that piece. And I remember bringing it to a piano lesson and saying, so what makes this piece so great? And he looked at me, and he was such a kind man. But this was the one moment where he kind of like got stern. And he was like, well, I can't tell you that. This is like spooning out the ocean with a teaspoon.
Perfect.
I was like, I don't understand that yet, but one day I will.
But just from hearing you describe his background.
Right. Yeah, he was well-traveled.
This formidable musician, this formidable person. And that's what he said to you. So I don't feel so guilty now about my wandering indirect answer.
I was looking for an answer that you can't find.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist. Not one person can know that.
Yep.
And so that's what he was telling me, but it was a shocking moment. And it took me years to understand what he was trying to say. Years.
See, now you tell me.
Yeah.
I was like,
I had to live 50 years to get that now.
When I saw that, I was like, okay, this is a trick question.
All right, so what is it?
It's like taking a teaspoon and
all right, so you're not going to give up an answer. All right.
I will not.
All right.
I cannot.
All right.
I cannot.
Very few dodge that question. So, all right. So, Ronnie, this is basically a throwaway question in the middle of a pandemic, but is there anything coming up that you want to share or promote?
Oh God, that's kind of tough. I probably should have thought just a little bit more about that. Well, I just think, I hope that people, after they listen to some of this and kind of get through some of the stuff that I've said and some of my ramblings, I hope that there's something here that encourages people that there's more than one way to do a thing. And that's important to know, understand, and share. Sometimes we have to violate expectancy, and sometimes you're able to do things in ways that you've never done them before, or no one has ever showed you to do before. That's okay. And I'm not knocking competence. I mean, if you're going to be a band director, you got to know how to put flutes and clarinets together. You got to know something about tuning and how to get kids, in armature and all those things. There's certain skills that you've got to know. But I just think that it's important, and I think I'm a promoter of this, that we use everything at our disposal to do what we do, because there's so much more at our disposal right now. There's so many. I mean, suppose when I was a graduate student, I had the internet, as opposed to going to the library at Michigan State, 9 floors, 2 wings, 9 stories each, plus 3 or 4 levels in the basement. Now I can sit home and look up this book, that journal. I can read it sitting in the privacy of my own home. And so I just think that we have to open up and stop being so narrow, so cookie cutter, so predictable in some ways. And I don't know, maybe I'm talking too broadly, but I think, I mean, and now, with this pandemic and all the things that we've been doing, education is never going to be what it was. It's never going to return to what it was. I don't know what it's going to be. I'm not psychic, and we've already seen that, that it's going to change. And this pandemic has exposed a lot of things, and you hear people talk, well, I'll be glad when things get back to normal. And I'm like, no, because normal was kind of screwed up in a lot of ways. So who wants to go back to that? And so I try to look again on the hopeful side that here is an opportunity for us in a lot of ways to stop, regroup, rethink, and decide where we want to go as human beings.
I absolutely agree with that. Just the other day, I had my annual, the assistant principal review of what I'm doing. And she asked, so, what's your vision for next year? And how do you see things? And I was like, well, this is an opportunity to reinvent everything I do, to start fresh.
Did she like that?
Oh yeah. She kind of looked at me like, really? What, in what way? And then I explained it. She's like, oh, I understand. Because, I inherited a program. Now I get to reinvent it the way I want it.
Well, maybe she should be a principal or an administrator since she liked it.
She's in her last year.
And you know why I said that.
Yeah. She's in her last year. I have terrific administrators. This job is the best administrators I've ever had.
Awesome. See, I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah, no, it's
so glad.
It's what makes the gig worth it. Yeah, Ronnie, so if someone wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
They can contact me through Northern Illinois University, rwooten@niu.edu. They can go to the website, and look me up. And even though, it seems like I get 1 trillion emails a day sometimes, but that's probably the best way. And I'm seriously gonna look into this. I mean, and maybe I'm too old to even think about this. I should have done it 20 years ago. But I've just been thinking about some things, as I, get a little bit older. And but yeah, that's the best way to contact me. So I try to be responsive. Again, it's easy. rwooten@niu.edu is the best way. Don't try to call me on my office phone because I hardly ever pick it up.
Yeah, no college professor answers our office phone.
I know. I'm like, you might as well just take this out.
It's a paperweight, basically.
And, but I hope that, again, I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. And like I said, what you are doing is moving the profession forward. And I'm not talking about just conducting and bands. I think what you're doing is going to move the entire profession forward. So I commend you for having the vision that you have, and I will not hold it against you that you know Damian Crutcher.
Don't worry.
You seem like a nice guy, a very smart guy. I'm glad to put you in the friend list now, and but I really commend and admire what you're doing. It's absolutely awesome. And, and some digital archive, in 100 years, and they're going to say, well, who was this black man from Eastern North Carolina, talking all country and stuff, it will be there for somebody, to maybe look at, laugh at, make fun or whatever. So this is important work, my friend.
I like to think it is. I like to believe that I'm giving something back to the community.
It is so awesome. And when I look at the number of people that you have interviewed, and a lot of these people I know personally and have had direct interaction with them, Jared Junkin and Alan McMurray and any number of people, I'm pleased to be a little part. And again, I hope I didn't babble too much and tell too many stories because I got more. And when I see you at the Midwest Band and Orchestra Clinic, we're going to have some adult beverages, and I got more stuff to talk about.
Well, you'll find me at the Barnhouse booth probably.
Well, see, I'm writing that down.
It was really nice to meet you. I've heard so much about you, and it's good to finally put a face to a name and get a conversation from you.
Well, I appreciate that so much. And again, thank you for inviting me to be a part of this extremely important work. And I keep saying that because it's the truth.